US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in India on the final leg of his two-day state visit. High on the agenda, a meeting with his Indian counterpart to discuss security in the Indo-Pacific. Now, reports say that the two delegations will focus on China's growing military presence in the Bay of Bengal, among other topics of regional concern. Mr. Sullivan had met with India's External Affairs Minister, S Jaishankar, as well, where both touched on other global strategic developments. The pair had also discussed preparations for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's upcoming visit to Washington, a trip that's been hailed as a milestone for the two nations. Mr. Sullivan had held talks with Mr. Modi yesterday and outlined some key deliverables for his trip next week. He says they include removing obstacles that stand in the way of smoother bilateral trade, citing critical areas like defence and high technology. For more, Neha Punya joins us live. She is in New Delhi. Neha, the two national security advisors, they're discussing regional concerns over China. What can we expect?
Well, this is the second meeting between the two. We saw restricted level discussions on Tuesday, and today we're seeing delegation level talks between the Indian and American national security advisors. We're given to understand while a lot of the discussions centered around ironing out details ahead of Prime Minister Modi's departure next week, especially with an eye on defense deals that are likely to be announced, a lot of their engagement also discussed China's activities in the Indo-Pacific. We've seen how the US has been wooing India quite aggressively to count on New Delhi to be a counter to China in the region. Particularly given the border standoff that's now entered its fourth year. We've seen how just a few months ago there was another skirmish between the Indian and Chinese soldiers in the Arunachal Pradesh region in India's northeast. Two areas remain disputed between both nuclear neighbors, and we've seen the kind of comments that have come from the US accusing China of coercing its neighbors on the issue of border security. So that's going to be one area where they're going to have discussions as well. The other concern, of course, from India's point of view also is China's increased presence in the Bay of Bengal region. It has been reportedly conducting surveillance activities there, getting access to that region through Myanmar, and that's likely to feature in their talks as well.
Now, while Jake Sullivan completes these final preparations, the focus really is on Mr. Modi's forthcoming visit to Washington. How significant is that trip going to be?
Well, Prime Minister Modi has been a frequent visitor to the United States since he came to power in 2014, averaging about one trip a year. But this is the first time he's been invited on a state visit, and that gives you a sense of how the US is pulling out all stops to the Indian Prime Minister and the kind of geopolitical heft that India brings to the table. We're given to understand that the focus will be on announcing one important defense deal, which will give India access to GE's F414 engines, which will be manufactured here locally. Prime Minister Modi's pet project has been making India self-reliant on the defense front. He's spoken repeatedly about India in a few years becoming the largest base for defense manufacturing in the world, and many analysts say that Prime Minister Modi is also using this visit to remind the US that it's not enough for the country to want to sell military equipment and arms to New Delhi. It also needs to be able to share technology that New Delhi can use to build capacity. And the Joe Biden administration, with an eye on China's growing belligerence in the region, is believed to be keen to play ball. The other focus, of course, is going to be on trade talks as well. We're given to understand that a lot of the issues that cropped up during the Trump administration and talks of a free trade agreement that were derailed when Joe Biden took over are also back on the table. So we might see some announcements on that front as well.
Neha, thank you for that. Neha Punya there in New Delhi.